Hello and welcome to Security Weekly News, sponsored by Matchbox Cars. And, I'm not going to say the rest of that. It's episode 147. Welcome to the week of 29 August 2021. And we're the Security Weekly News. I want to say special thanks to the awesomeness of Aaron Leyland for filling in next week. China limits gaming. ISIS gets caught using AWS. Tensorflow, ChaosDB, CISA and multifactor, Sudo bugs, Baron Samedit, and Papa Legba. All this and Jason Wood on the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly. For security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. With the skills gap increasing, it's more important than ever to train your staff effectively and efficiently. Offensive Security provides training for your organization designed by the same minds behind Kali Linux. Here are two recent offerings from OffSec. OffSec Academy gives you the chance to earn industry-leading OSCP certification with dedicated one-on-one mentoring. You can also try Proving Grounds Enterprise, created exclusively by Offensive Security's InfoSec experts for highly realistic simulated networks. Visit securityweekly.com/offsec to learn more.
All right. So Sophos released information on ransomware they discovered by looking at the exploited proxy shell vulnerabilities back in July. They named the ransomware lock file. And I guess the sort of interesting thing about the story was about the technique that Lockfile uses. And one of the articles that is a link through to Sophos and the whole report has a lot of detail. If you're interested in such things like how these things work, they have all the assembly code and how it was deconstructed and how it works and all the instructions and whatever. But they were talking about it's a new technique in ransomware, which involves something called intermittent encryption, which is more complicated than it sounds. Although actually it's exactly what that means, but that sounds like, wow, this must be something really elaborate and complicated. But basically what happens is, and it is pretty clever, it takes a file that it wants to encrypt, and then it skips forward 16 bytes, which actually makes sense to me, because that may be part of the header in that file. So every one of those files has got that hex header sitting on the front of it that identifies what kind of file it is. So it may not skip the whole header, but it's skipping part of it. Then it encrypts the next 16 bytes, and so that part's encrypted. Then it skips another block. Then it encrypts the next 16 bytes, and it keeps doing that all the way through the file. So not all the file itself is actually encrypted. And so what that does is it makes the file itself appear more like a normal file. Because if your anti-malware products or your anti-ransomware products is looking at files and says, oh, wow, look there's an encrypted file, it's going to set off an alert. But if it looks at a file and it sees what appears to be a normal file header, it may well ignore it, and it looks at the statistical behavior or the way the file actually looks. And he said because you can see plain text words and text and document files and things like that, it may actually help it to avoid detection. The malware is pretty interesting in and of itself. It has a long list of file types that it ignores, it was a very huge list of different files, and it ignores JPEG files, which I thought was pretty interesting kind of thing. But anyway, it loads all the targeted files up in memory. It encrypts them in memory, which is a lot faster to do, and then it performs this intermittent encryption on the file, and then it writes it back on the drive. The Sophos document does have a lot of information about this. The threat post article that is on the wiki has probably a more concise explanation of how it works. So depending on who's reading it or what you're interested in, one of those probably should suffice. HP Enterprise was warning of a high severity vulnerability in Sudo, everybody's favorite thing. We all love Sudo because you have to type it so many times. But it is that Sudo. But basically, HPE was warning of this for their Aruba Airwave Management platform. So the vulnerability that is in Sudo can allow unprivileged and unauthenticated local users to obtain root on the host. So this is, obviously pretty severe. Airwave is HPE's real-time monitoring and security alert system for wired and wireless infrastructures. I looked that up to see what it was. And Qualys was the one who found the vulnerability, and they said it was probably the most significant Sudo vulnerability in recent memory. That's what they said. And they said it had been there for almost 10 years. So this is a pretty old vulnerability that nobody had noticed. And the vulnerability then, Qualys, I guess, made up this name, called it Baron Samedit. And at first I thought it said Samedit, and I was like, what is that? And then I realized what it was. It's Baron Samedit. I don't know how you say it, but that is a voodoo reference. And I was really excited because a long time ago, I actually made a Dungeon and Dragon adventure that was based on Haitian voodoo. And Baron Samedi is a Loa, which is a spirit it's one of the dead spirits that you can invoke to do stuff in voodoo. And so, I mean, I'm not that I'm an expert on it, but it was just like Baron Samedi. I was like, maybe that's what it means, which was kind of interesting. And Baron Samedi, by the way, likes rum, cigars, top hats, all kinds of stuff like that. And, it sounds like if you're going to invite a Loa to a party, that would be the one you might invite. I mean, I know it's related to the dead, but I mean, rum, top hats, cigars sounds pretty fun. And also was in Live and Let Die. So if you've ever seen that. And that's almost all I know about Haitian voodoo. I knew a few other things about Haitian voodoo, but we probably shouldn't even be talking about this, right? I don't know. Anywho, HPE publicly announced the flaw last week and said it affects a platform prior to version 8.2.13.0, which was released the 18th of June. So pretty much a lot of them. So Qualys said the bug was introduced in 2011, and it does affect Linux, it does affect BSD, it does affect Fedora, and all kinds of other distros that have sudo in them that are old versions, and most of them are. Ubuntu 20.04 has it. And that version was really old. And Debian, Fedora, you name it, they all had it, and they've all issued security warnings regarding this. The bug itself is a heap-based overflow, which which does sound like something that happens at a party with Baron Samedi. There's a heap-based overflow, but the overflow will allow a local user to cause sudo to run in shell mode. So it's one of those old tricks that was always out there a long time ago to get it's a different way to do it, but to get a shell, around Linux. And so this is another way to inject essentially a shell in Linux and have root privilege. So, I guess this is something about, I don't know why the name, but anyway, cool naming though, Qualys. I like it. We should do more voodoo names. CISA took a strong stance on single-factor authentication at long last. They basically added it to their naughty list, which is called the Bad Practices Catalog, which is cool. Band name called it. But the Bad Practices Catalog contains all their things that are, bad practices. This particular practice was defined, this single-factor authentication, was defined as exceptionally risky and likely to result in the appearance of Papa Legba. Oh, sorry, I couldn't help. I couldn't help myself. And if you aren't up on your voodoo, Papa Legba is the gateway that connects the Loa to the world. Yeah, that's right, Papa Legba. In some cultures, Papa Legba is kind of like Loki, actually. He's like a trickster guy. But anyway, is this Cool Religions of the Modern World 305? I might be in the wrong class. I thought that, yeah, okay. Anyway, this is a big step forward for CISA, though, to start pushing government agencies and contractors into multi-factor. And they did state, quote, the use of single-factor authentication for remote or administrative access to systems supporting the operation of critical infrastructure and national critical functions is dangerous and significantly elevates risk to national security, national economic security, and national public health and safety and the children. I mean, it was like, okay, basically what we've been saying for years, right? Single-factor authentication bad, okay? I mean, But anyway, the article reports a study by Google, NYU, and the University of California, San Diego that they found using multi-factor authentication can block up to 100% of automated bots, 99% of bulk. I don't know how they got these numbers. 99% of bulk phishing attacks and 66% of targeted attacks. White or whites, always. So this report should give you some ammo, though. If you want to try to get an MFA up and running and get budget for that, here is some nice, solid ammo. CISA has also opened a GitHub that has a bad practices page to get feedback from all of you. So currently under consideration for the naughty list, they haven't added them yet, are weak crypto, Flat network topologies for 500, Alex. Flat network topologies. Intermingling IT and OT, universal administrator accounts, reuse of compromised systems without sanitizing them. Oh, that is just gross. And sending sensitive, unencrypted, unauthenticated traffic over uncontrolled networks. And poor physical controls. Why those things haven't been put on the naughty list already, I don't know. But go there and be sure and give them your 2 shillings worth, because I think they need some more evidence to make sure that flat network topologies is considered dangerous. Microsoft issued guidance for Azure users that were affected by ChaosDB. ChaosDB is a vulnerability in Azure which can allow attackers to gain full admin rights to all of the data. And that's read-write, not just read. That's read-write. This system is called CosmosDB, and it runs on Azure. So this is a very interesting product. Cosmos is a globally distributed NoSQL database, which it doesn't really mean it doesn't have SQL in it, by the way. It means not only SQL. But a NoSQL database tool, it's used by a lot of large players like Coca-Cola, Mercedes, Citrix, and a whole big long list of people. Not only SQL database structures are pretty cool if you've never seen one, but they're often used on very large data sets. That was sort of their purpose in life. And what they do is they allow a lot more flexibility than traditional relational databases, which are based on tables. These things are sometimes called non-relational databases because they don't really work the way those old relational databases do. They can work like that, but they don't always. And basically what happens is they allow you to organize data in different ways. And they may have they have a JSON document that defines all these objects. And so the objects are translated into JSON documents. And it is a way to put massive objects into a large collection using these various approaches. Anyway, the bug was found by Wiz research team in the Jupyter, spelled with a Y for some reason, the Jupyter network feature. I'm sure it's supposed to be Jupyter, but and I did not mistype it. But it is a default feature that is loaded in the Cosmos system. So if you're using Cosmos DB, this was part of it. The bug allows you to get hold of the primary read-write keys, so you can extract them from there, and that basically means you own the database, so you can then just get back in. Microsoft sent alerts out to about 30% of their customers. Don't know why they didn't send it to all of them, but okay. And on 26th August, and they said they had disabled the Jupyter network feature on this server. Now, they did turn around and say that no customer data had been accessed because of this vulnerability. Microsoft advised to regenerate your Cosmos DB keys and has other security recommendations in the article. Some of them were kind of just, like generic stuff, but it's probably, if you're using that product, it's probably well worth your time. Tensorflow is a very popular open source Python machine learning library. So if you've ever gotten involved in any kind of ML stuff, you've probably heard about Tensorflow or considered using it. It is very popular. I've played with it. The dev team for Tensorflow has revoked support for YAML. And this was due to an arbitrary code execution vulnerability in the YAML code. There was an advisory on GitHub that was then confirmed by TensorFlow Keras, which said that a wrapper library for TensorFlow used the unsafe function, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And what that does is it could deserialize YAML encoded machine learning models. So this is that unsafe load is a way that you deconstruct or deserialize YAML. And if you don't know how all that stuff works, what happens is when you want to take objects and you want to send them to another tool, or you want to send them over a wire, they use YAML to encode them or serialize them. And that serialization puts them in a format that can be easily submitted, and then you deserialize them on the other end. It's kind of like an old modem or something doing that. It's not the same thing, but it's kind of like that. There's a proof of concept on the GitHub site if you want to see how that works. But basically the attack then it allows you to inject code into this serialized YAML input, and you can inject pretty much anything into it because the way they did the functions, it's considered not sanitized, and that is a huge problem. So basically, the serialization process is flawed, and they don't sanitize the data properly. And subsequently, well, you could just inject all sorts of things into the stream. Google has patched more than 100 bugs in TensorFlow just this year, and does have documents with comprehensive security guidelines for this problem. But in this case, basically, it boils down to don't use the unsafe_load function, which I would always hesitate to use anyway. It's kind of like unsafe load. So yeah, but you actually have to install something to use the safe load function. So it's kind of like the telnet SSH sort of thing. You keep wondering why people keep using telnet, but then they go, oh, I'd have to install SSHD. Like, oh no, how difficult is that? Anyway, in this case, the function is literally called unsafe load. So take it for what it's worth. An ISIS propaganda website has been running on AWS since April. On Friday, Amazon said they had disabled this site. The group called Nida-i-Haq is an Islamic State media group that distributes content in the Urdu language, which is spoken in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and it uses AWS to host its content. Amazon Web Services does have a policy against working with terrorists. So they do have acceptable use policies. Like, if you now, I don't know how they determine what a terrorist is and what a terrorist organization is. So I don't know if it's like, hey, they have a little box and it's like terrorist, no terrorist, and if you click no terrorist, they let you through, because I don't really know how they make those determinations. But that's not for me to decide. Anyway, this group was hosting content which claimed credit. I think it was on Thursday, they claimed credit for the suicide bombing in Kabul that killed 170 people. The Washington Post was investigating this, and they reported on how the terror group was using AWS to promote extremism. AWS then immediately said, oh, yeah, I guess they kind of are. And they said it's violation of their acceptable use policy and shut the site down. Source code for the app being used drew words and images from another site that was being run by the Islamic State propaganda arm, which also ISIS. So I just wanted to say, whether or not you agree with policy level decisions in Afghanistan over all the years that everybody's been in Afghanistan, and I bet all of us out here probably either are or know people who served in Afghanistan, and they did their very best. I know I have some friends, they were there, they did their best, and they did what they thought was right. I don't know what the correct policy, action, et cetera, is for these complex world situations, but I do know that all the service people were over there to do a job, and they did them as best as they could, regardless of what was happening in Moscow or Washington or London or Mar-a-Lago or anywhere else. And so all the policy think tanks and strategic planning sessions aside, thanks to all the people that served in Afghanistan and did their best. And Amazon, maybe like quit hosting terror groups, really. When we return, Jason Wood joins us with commentary, so stick around.
Every 11 seconds, there's a new ransomware attack. Oil pipelines, universities, corporations, all paying millions of dollars. Barracuda says, don't pay the ransom. Before a ransomware attack occurs, train your teams to recognize an attack and use anti-phishing technology. Protect your applications, and they can't get onto your network. Simple backup and restore solutions quickly recover your data without paying the ransom. Build your ransomware protection plan now by visiting securityweekly.com/Barracuda. That's securityweekly.com/Barracuda.
He's considered one of the foremost analysts, collectors, archivist, and historian of ASCII2 pornography. His paper, The Erotic Use of Backslash and Forslash Keys, is just considered required reading in most technology programs, even to this day. It's none other than Mr. Jason Wood.
Hey, Doug, welcome back.
Thanks.
Good to see you again.
Yeah.
This week seemed like, Doug and I were talking about it, seemed like it was kind of a quiet news week in some ways. It's not like there wasn't a lot of things that were happening, but for my part, where I talk a little bit more about specific stories, there just wasn't much for me that got my attention that I wanted to talk about. While it sucks, Coinbase set out notifications to 125,000 users that their two-factor authentication settings had changed, and that people panicked and sold all their crypto tokens because they thought their accounts got hacked. There's really not much else I could say about that other than say maybe, hey, Coinbase, don't do that again. That sucks for your customers. So, I even debated the story that I found about this guy named Dr. Doug White, who was seen doing nude skydiving in protest over a college football practice in protest of the use of artificial turf versus natural grass. But, while it's an unusual story, there's not much for me to say other than, hey, Doug, put that away.
It wasn't nudity. It wasn't nudity. It was a crotchless Uncle Sam costume. So just get the story correct.
Whatever. Did you have to scare those ducks that badly? Anyhow. However, I ran into this story, blog post by a gentleman named Harlan Carvey that really resonated with me. I liked what he shared. And this is a little bit more of a career, things he's observed over his career. And I just liked the post. The title of the post is Tips for DFIR Analysts. And you can find this on his blog, which is titled Windows Incident Response. Coincidentally, if you check our show notes, you can find the link there too. But in this post, Harlan points out there's some things that I thought were really useful for us. And some of this obviously is going to be specific to DFIR, but other portions of it I think are actually useful in a variety of other disciplines as well. Now he starts out right from the gate, kind of getting after how we look at detections and some of the narrow view we have on this. We have this urge in security. We want to find something that's perfect, that's really going to work, that's going to be this amazing detection or mechanism of doing something or other. And, as a result, we stagnate as we hunt for this perfect thing rather than deploy something that works and is maybe not as sexy. So he gives an example here. He says, hey, how about instead of looking for the perfect detection, write detections that you're just going to kind of put an adversary in a situation where they have to trip over it. And he gives an example of an organization that they had an adversary get into their environment, and this adversary kept using the net command, net.exe on Windows, to add user accounts. Now, that's a legitimate command. I remember being introduced to it in my early days of my career, taking my Microsoft training and stuff like that. But in this organization, they never created accounts that way. And so while this was, legitimate tools, the usage wasn't. And so he prompted them to write detections basically for the use of the net command, and some things that they saw the adversary doing. Sure enough, the adversary comes back a little bit later. They had alternate mechanisms apparently to get into the environment, and the victim was able to very quickly catch them up because they were again using the net use command or net user command and creating accounts, and that trip, made it where they were immediately visible. Again, is this the most exciting detection ever? No, not at all. Was it effective? Well, in this case, absolutely. In fact, in a lot of our environments, it probably would be. I do want to underscore this bit that, because this is, somewhat brittle, if you will, kind of detection maybe. Oh, the adversary could just use a different command. Well, yes, but they like to use this sort of thing. So, while I want to caution you and say, hey, this isn't a silver bullet, this isn't something that, is necessarily, maybe your environment uses the net command, I don't know, to create user accounts, and then this would be a rough thing to implement. The point here is those we're writing detections that are effective and are focused on how adversaries operate. What do you find about, what are you reading about how adversaries do things? What are some of the techniques that they use? What are some of the things that they will almost always do when they get into an intrusion? And how common are those things in your environment? Probably not very. We have a lot of tooling and stuff like that we use outside of the basic Windows commands to do stuff. So, as a starting place for that, take a look at honestly, the third paragraph of Harlan's post here, because he's got at least two solid techniques, one of them being the use of the net command. I see adversaries using this an awful lot. So, look around for things like this. As you read this, take notes, see how it applies to your environment, and see if you can apply that. There are a lot of points here, I think, that as an adversary operates, there's a lot of points that we can catch them. Maybe it's difficult to catch them on that initial access, but every time they run a command, this gives us a new opportunity. Another point he makes is about the effectiveness of a good demo. And organizations have this tendency to make assumptions about how good their defenses are and how likely something is able to happen. And then we tend to overestimate our ability to catch things, or that's not possible, or whatnot. Harvey gives an example here of collecting password hashes using Loftcrack in an environment. And as he was about to do this, he's setting up, he's explaining what he's doing. The company is explaining, no, this will never work. We've got our password hashes locked down all over the place. He hits the enter key and immediately password hashes show up on the screen. Well, that didn't work out too well as far as their assumptions about their environment. And this organization started making some changes. It communicated the message of, hey, what you thought isn't really the case. I was mentoring SANS's incident handling class one time, a number of years back. During one of my demonstrations, as part of, kind of we'd get together once a week and talk through things. I showed how to exploit a Windows host using MSO 8067, which, to give you an idea how long ago this was, that was actually a relevant technique at the time and was fairly common to find. It was kind of new, actually, at that point. So it was a while ago. But one of the students perked up at this a little bit. Apparently, this was something going on in his environment. He created a demo on a VM for his environment, showed it to the right people. He'd been trying to get traction to patch and update systems and kept being told no for who knows what reasons. And his demo was kind of the key to getting the support needed to deploy this patch throughout the environment. The demo communicated, the risk, the issues there, and how easy it is. So, this is something this is a super powerful way to get around getting support for things. Pen testers, right? You come in with a pen test report. Here's what they did. All of a sudden, you start getting more support. Hopefully. Anyhow, keep in mind though, as you're doing your demos, who your audience is. Your director of security, they're much more likely to follow all the technical details of this and understand the impact to the business and make their own observations about this. Somebody else in the organization who may be very influential to you getting support that you need, like maybe an application owner or process owner, they may not understand all of that. So make sure that as you're doing your demo, you're explaining what those impacts are. Hey, these are techniques that ransomware operators like to use. And see, as I walk through this and show you how this works, here's how they can encrypt the data, stop the system, stop the process that you're depending on to make a lot of money for the organization. That is a risk they get. And all of a sudden, okay, we're willing to accept maybe some downtime to reboot a system or what have you. Carvey has a number of other points that I really liked in his post. One of the things that stood out to me that I chuckled at, because this was kind of one of my observations, he makes some comments about this, people making judgments on sophistication or the skill of an actor based on whether or not the command was exciting or novel or sexy in some way. And, basically, if they work and if the victim isn't watching, then why does the adversary have to go to some new and novel technique or something that looks elite to accomplish their goal? They don't have to do that. So instead they stick to their basics and they just keep working towards their objective. They have a defined outcome that they're looking for, and they're going after that. So just because the commands an adversary is using aren't super exciting to you does not mean that this is a script kiddie or somebody who's easy or doesn't know what they're doing out here. They can always up their game. When I think about sophistication of an actor, I tend to look at it like preparation, their infrastructure that they're using, how they're acting. It actually gets kind of interesting when you watch adversaries that have already been in their environment for a while. They've got a pretty good idea where things are, and they work through very deliberately to their objective. You don't see them wandering off into weird paths and stuff. They stay on point and are going after their goal. And also their willingness to come back using different access methods, different credentials that they've already stolen or picked up from somewhere. They just appear as a different user. And they'll alter their tactics in response to the environment. So as we're making things difficult for them, they'll up their game as necessary. So just be aware of that. I mean, maybe they're just using the net command to do some stuff. But that doesn't mean that they're beginners and they don't know what they're doing. There are others in this thing. It's a great post to read through. Highly recommend you take some time to read it, think about it. How does this apply to your environment? Got the link here for you in the show notes.
All right. Thank you, Jason. And finally, China. Oh, China. China has announced that minors may only play video games for an hour on Fridays, weekends, and holidays. 1 hour. That's it, kids. Put them down. And minors are banned from playing any games during the school week. The policy starts tomorrow, so finish up all those levels that you were trying to do. This isn't the first maneuver on this matter by China. In 2019, citing nearsightedness and addiction, they banned minors from gaming after 2200 hours at 10 p.m. and before 8 a.m., and they only allowed 90 minutes of gaming on weekdays at all. The government will require minors to register the games with their real names now, and they're going to require gaming companies to require real authenticated names. Tencent was already doing this supposedly with a game called Honor of Kings, which I don't know anything about it, but they apparently were already doing that, and that's apparently a very popular game in China. Tencent said that they fully supported the new rule, and they will make every effort to follow it. China also has limits on spending to 400 yuan a month, which is about $62. South Korea has just ended a law that they had passed limiting access for minors and asked parents to manage it instead. So, but if anybody can do it, China can do it. But I bet the gamers will find a way. So maybe this is just a subtle way to train new hackers for tomorrow, right? I mean, how do you beat the gaming restrictions? Anyway, thanks, Jason. Thanks for joining us today on Security Weekly News. I'll see you on Friday with the Security Weekly News wrap-up show. Get your shots, you filthy animals.